Formulas for a normal t-test. Standard error, or S subscript m. S divided by the square root of n. T, m minus mu divided by standard error, or SM. D, m minus mu divided by S. Formulas for a related samples t-test. Degrees of freedom. N minus 1. The mean difference, or M subscript D. The sum of D divided by N. D equals MD divided by S. Standard error, or SMD, is S divided by the square root of N. T equals MD minus mu D divided by SMD. Other equations. Sum of squares, or SS. E sum of x squared minus the sum of x in parentheses squared divided by n. S, the square root of SS divided by df. Chapter 8. When are t-tests used? A normal t-test is used when the variance, or sigma, isn't known and there's one sample. How to find the t-crit? Search the degrees of freedom row under the alpha column. If alpha isn't given, alpha equals 0.05. If n is greater than 30, it approaches the z curve or crit and increases the likelihood of rejecting the null. What happens to the distribution as n increases? As n increases, the distribution narrows and the tails shorten, which increases the likelihood of rejecting the null hypothesis. What is the shape of the t-distribution? It's a bell shape with heavier tails. What do we expect the t-stat to look like when the null hypothesis is true? T will be closer to 0 and is in the body of the distribution. Hypothesis testing for a directional test. State HO in words and numerically. Determine which tail. 2. Write alpha, directionality, and degrees of freedom. Then find the t-crit using the degrees of freedom and draw. 3. Solve for standard error, or SM, by solving for sum of squares and then S first, as well as T and then D. 4. Decide if H0 is rejected or not and state the statistical decision. For a non-directional test. 1. Write HO in words and numerically. 2. Write alpha, non-directional, and degrees of freedom. Then find t-crit, which you don't split for 2 tails, and draw. 3. Solve for standard error by finding SS and then S first, as well as T. 4. Decide if the null hypothesis is rejected or not and state the statistical decision. Remember that D does not need to be provided if the test results in the null hypothesis being rejected. What is the influence of a change in the difference between M and mu on the t statistic? As the difference between the means increase, so does the t statistic. Chapter 9. How to identify a matched sample t-test, and when we use related samples t-tests. When sigma isn't known, there are 2 plus samples that are related or have the same participants. How hypothesis testing changes. X is now D, which is x1 minus x2. There's a new sample mean, MD, and standard error, SMD, as well as mu D stated on the hypothesis. However, the equations are the same. It is just the coding and subscript. How the T distribution resembles the Z distribution. Their means are both 0, and both of them are normal. How T distribution changes with degrees of freedom. As degrees of freedom increases, T distribution approaches normal. What do we expect the T-stat to look like if the null hypothesis is true? The T-stat approaches 0 and is in the body. What to find before hypothesis testing with T. Data in the problem, independent variable, dependent variable, which t-test to use, and directionality through the research question.